All right, great. Thanks, Diana. Welcome, everyone. This is Faraz Sayed. We're really excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking about SAP testing and some of the best practices and some capabilities from UiPath that focus on SAP testing. So I've also got, as a part of introduction, I've got Chris Emerson with me, who's my SE. So Chris, you want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Faraz. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Emerson. I'm a sales engineer here at UiPath, and I am located in Florida in the United States. I've been working in automation for 20 plus years, and I'm really excited to be here today to show you guys some great stuff about SAP testing with UiPath.
Great, thanks, Chris. So folks, we're going to cover quite a few topics here. So we're going to start with a little bit of introduction around UiPath Test Suite. We're going to talk about why SAP and UiPath. We're going to discuss some of the success stories, walk you through some of the things that we're seeing in the market in terms of the SAP migration from ECC to S/4HANA. Chris is going to show you Test Suite in action with SAP. He's also going to cover heat map and change impact analysis. We'll close this out with Q&A and call to action. Now, before I get into the content, just wanted to put this out there that in this session, we're going to be talking about some forward-looking statements, capabilities, roadmap. These are, subject to change, and just wanted to put that out there so that everyone is aware of. All right, let's talk a little bit about UiPath to set the stage, and then we can kind of go from there, right? So we had very humble beginnings in 2005 when we started with screen scraping. Over the years, we have quite a bit of journey. Started off with screen scraping, then went into RPA. We really, mastered the RPA space, and since then, we've invented a number of things. For example, AI computer vision, which is a UiPath technology that's production grade that now we're using in test and lower environments. We also came up with other solutions such as process mining, which allows you to mine your processes, understand what your processes look like within your SAP or any application footprint. We launched Test Suite about 3-4 years ago, around 2021. And the reason for launching Test Suite was that, again, going back to what I said earlier, our RPA technology, the automation technology, is production grade. So we said, okay, why not bring the same technology and apply it to lower environment? And this technology is very resilient, right? And if you compare us to anybody out in the market in the testing space, nobody can say that, hey, we have production grade technology that we're now using within test environment. Now, recently, it was announced that Test Suite is the leader in IDC market space, especially in testing. We also have a number of initiatives going on since last year that focus on generative AI. I'm sure you have heard the buzzword autopilot from UiPath. Autopilot is a solution, it's a capability that augments testers and developers in leveraging UiPath platform. Today, we are a leader in the AI-powered continuous testing space, and we're going to be talking about some of the capabilities and things that differentiate us. Now, before I get into why SAP and UiPath, just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things here. Obviously, we're a leader in the Gartner, Everest, IDC, surveys, from automation to intelligent document processing to low-code application, as well as test automation. I'm specifically proud of test automation because it's we're fairly new and young to the market, but we've made a tremendous impact within the testing space, and we're now considered one of the leaders in test automation space. So why UiPath and SAP? I'm sure you have all heard of the recent partnership that we have established with SAP, which is really an accomplishment for us, and as well as a solid partnership with SAP. The reason for that are many, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things here, right? With UiPath, we provide capabilities and solutions which really accelerates SAP migration. For example, by leveraging automation, you don't have to actually custom code your SAP system. And that's why it makes, it allows you to be a clean core. We also provide integration beyond SAP, as you will see, as Chris is going to talk about. When we talk about specifically on the integration, UiPath is a solution that goes across any technology stack, whether that's Salesforce, web-based, Citrix, green screen, you name it, and we can work with it. So integration beyond SAP is important, as well as fast and proven pathways, where we have a pretty robust marketplace that I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with, that provides you a lot of different accelerators, especially around SAP and other ERP systems. For testing purposes, we do have certain solution accelerators on marketplace for SAP that I would encourage everyone to look at. Now, as I mentioned, UiPath and SAP established a partnership. We're part of a very special program at SAP called Endorse App. This is an invite only, and UiPath was recently onboarded. The reason for this is if you look at, for example, at the UiPath platform, we just not only focus on one area, but it's across the life cycle of business processes or any organization. For example, we have tools and capabilities on the platform that allows you to do task mining, communication mining, being able to bring all this data and do analytics on it. You can also automate processes, for example, with low-code development, which we allow as part of a studio. You can also do process orchestration, intelligent document processing as well. On the operate, which is really on the execution, day-to-day side of things, we provide analytics. Also, continuous testing is part of that solution, making sure that your code or your application, whether that's RPA or application itself, is tested and is robust when it goes into production. Now, testing has been around for a long time, right? I mean, I don't want to age myself here, but I think I've been in it for around 23, 25 years now. And one of the things that I've kind of realized over these 20 some years is that, if you look at test automation, it really hasn't changed that much since the 2000s, right? You had originally Mercury Interactive, which was acquired by HP, that had tools like UFT, ALM. Then came around our competition, which is Tricentis and some of the other tools that are coming in. And what we have seen is that it's really been the same. What I mean by that is that you have developers writing code, tossing the code over to testers. They will do their testing, and then it goes into production. But from UiPath perspective, we're really reimagining how testing can be done. And testing, if you think about it, it's not just a job of developer or tester. It's really a combination of various personas, and really what we call testing takes a village, which really is true. So with that, we've kind of looked at how do we focus testing on different personas, right? Traditionally, you have developers who have programming background, coding background. They feel very comfortable with it. They can actually code. UFT comes to mind. Some of Selenium open source tools come to mind that can be used by developers, but you have to have that programming background. Second persona is technical testers. These are really your QA folks. And again, traditionally, they have also used test automation. However, with UiPath, we're focusing on low code, no code. And the reason for that is that we want to bring more people into testing. So with technical testers, we provide capabilities with Studio that allows you to do low code automation. And then with business testers, these are your business folks that also we're bringing into the fold in testing that can leverage the platform and capabilities within Test Suite, but they don't have to really have any programming background. We have capabilities specifically around no code using task capture that allows business testers to be involved within the testing process. Also to say that all these assets that are developed by different personas, they can be shared and reused across the board. Not only in testing, but also you can take this particular automation and reuse it in your production environment for your RPA purposes, right? So reuse and reusability and sharing automation is a key factor. Now, as we are living in an age of generative AI, things are changing very rapidly. They're changing very fast. And with that, UiPath is also looking at some of these new technologies and coming up with innovative ways of solving some of the traditional problems. So with that, we've introduced a solution called Autopilot for testers. What Autopilot allows you to do is a couple of things. One, it allows you to really augment your manual efforts that you're spending. For example, writing test cases, which can be a very intensive process. It can take anywhere from 4, 8, 12 hours. With Autopilot, we're able to speed up that entire process. And how do we do that? We do it by feeding in the requirements into the Autopilot, and it will generate test cases for you. And then you can refine those test cases and then generate decoded automation based on that. You can also generate synthetic data and also derive insights. So that's about Autopilot. Autopilot is, again, agnostic to any technology. It can be applied to SAP or any other technology that's our application that's out there. So SAP, it's it's a complex environment. You've got a lot of moving parts. You've got monthly, weekly bundles, updates coming in. You have security updates, patches coming in, different transports flying around from different environments. And normally what we see is that quality assurance tends to be an area where we run into bottlenecks, right? For example, I'm still finding out a lot of the customers and companies out there are still doing manual testing, or they're using legacy test automation tools, which are difficult to maintain. Obviously, with manual testing, we know manual testing is resource intensive. It takes a lot of time. In one of the examples with recently, I was talking to a customer. Every time they do a deployment, they have a number of releases. They have, I think, about 4 to 6 releases a year, but every release takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks to do the testing. And the testing is really done by business analysts who have day job. They're focused on their day job, but they're taking time away to do the testing. So suffice to say that that particular way of doing is very expensive. It's resource intensive. It takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of room for error. And that's where we believe that UiPath test automation solution comes into play, because obviously we know testing can be overwhelming, especially in the large deployments of SAP or these large applications that are moving into production environment. So what are some of the common challenges that we see with inefficient testing? Obviously, if you don't do proper testing, it has downstream impact. You have slower delivery. For example, as I was talking about, taking anywhere from 8 weeks to 12 weeks, that becomes your most expensive phase of the project in terms of the resources, the cost, the speed, all that, right? There's also operational risk. For example, if you're always testing a happy path with manual testing, chances are there's going to be something is going to break into production environment, and ultimately it's going to have that impact. And nobody wants anything to break in production environment because it has so many downstream impact on the customer experience, user experience, business costs, losing money. Especially if you're a publicly traded company, they're even higher risk with being in the news and all that good stuff. So resource intensive, we talked about that as well. In this particular scenario that I was talking to a customer, it actually required about 100 manual testers, and these are not even manual testers. These are basically your business analysts that they're doing the testing. So resource intensive, can be very, very expensive. And really there's a high cost. What we typically see when talking to the CIOs is that if you look at the typical SAP project, there is about 30 to 40% of the budget is really spent on testing. That's extremely high. And the main reason behind why it's expensive is because it's manual, because it's resource intensive. So that's ultimately results in a high cost. Now with UiPath, we can not only test the application, but you can also test your RPA. So obviously if you are implementing SAP, we encourage you to look at UiPath to look at where you can drive operational efficiencies with automation. But it's important to note that the business process automation, or what we call robotic process automation, can break as well. If anything changes in the application, environment, data, your robots will break in production. So our point of view is that you have to take a holistic approach at testing, not only testing the application, but making sure that your robots and your process automation, business automation is also working without any disruption. Now, UiPath is unique, and especially when we talk about Test Suite, is that you just need one IDE to be able to work with any technology. And I call this technology agnostic. I'm yet to come across something, technology that we cannot work with. For some examples include, obviously, we're talking about SAP, SAP GUI, SAP Fiori, Citrix, you've got web-based application, API, mobile application, that can all be done from one IDE within Test Suite. The Test Suite solution is open and extensible. It integrates in your CI/CD pipeline or DevOps. You're able to plug into the existing test management or ALM tools that you have. We have, I think, about 60 plus out of the box integration between Test Manager and third-party testing tools out there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's comprehensive automation. So within one scenario, you can go from, and Chris is going to showcase this, you can go from a web-based screen to a SAP GUI to mobile app, green screen, all that can be done comprehensively within one solution. So you don't have to have a solution for API testing, one solution for Citrix, another solution for SAP. Basically, we solve the problem with one solution across the board. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Chris, who's going to walk us through some of the demos, talk a little bit about some of the capabilities that we have. With that, Chris, take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Faraz. Let's see if you stop sharing. I can start sharing.
Yep, there you go.
All righty. Okay, everybody. So what I want to do is take you through some of the details here. And we're going to start by just getting an overview around Test Suite and what the capabilities are. And I want to give you an understanding of how Test Suite is structured. And if you're familiar with the UiPath platform, how it fits into the platform overall. Then we're going to look at a demo, a couple of demos of some basic just scripting of SAP so that you can see what it really looks and feels like. And then I want to give you an overview of our change impact analysis and heat map capabilities targeted at SAP to help you determine exactly what to test. So let's go into the Test Suite overview itself. Test Suite, for those of you that are not familiar with Test Suite, is made up of 4 components that are part of our platform. The component that is new to the mix here is the UiPath Test Manager. So in addition to the UiPath Studio, which is used to build the automations for many different parts of the platform across RPA, across capabilities for discovering opportunities for automation like process mining, document understanding, it also plays directly into building test cases. The orchestrator is the component that's going to actually help us manage all of the automations and all the robots that are then used to run those automations. So we've got those 4 pieces working for us. And what we can see here is an illustration of how UiPath is really built to be an open architecture, or was built with an open architecture to be able to connect to a lot of different services. Really the key to success and managing the landscape of all of the applications that are in an enterprise is the ability to pull them together. This is the modern way to do things because there's no escaping the fact that reliance upon multiple applications is just a fact of life. So we can connect easily with, as Faraz was saying, over 60 plus different life cycle related tools, ALM tools, things like SAP Solution Manager, Azure DevOps to create CI/CD pipelines, to aid with in-sprint automation, all sorts of things. Now, in addition to that, we can also capture flows. So if there is a manual test flow or business analyst is accustomed to doing a manual test flow, they can use our task capture utility to actually create a process definition document, diagram, and the basis for an automated script all in one. And we can put that into Test Manager, then feed that into Studio to be able to create a full-fledged automation from that. And our ability to cross barriers or kind of cross application interfaces is a really important point here. So within a single workflow, we can really talk to different UIs. They can be natively recognized. They could be through a Citrix terminal. They could be an API. There's really no limit to anything. As long as it shows up on the screen, we can interact with it with our robots. So with all that being said, I think we should take a look at an example now. So let's go over here to this is a video, and I'm going to talk you through this. What this is doing is an end-to-end test case where we're creating an opportunity in Salesforce, then creating the sales order and capturing the order number in Fiori, or capturing the order number and then putting it into the Fiori interface. Then we're going to go into SAP Classic and then go into AS400. And the first thing we need to do is kick this off from Test Manager. So that's what that was doing. So to create this test opportunity, we're going to be using some synthetic data, but we could also pull in data from a variety of sources. We could use an Excel file, SQL database, flat file, or we could pull from an API. So with UiPath integration services, we can connect to APIs and then use those APIs as data sources within our Studio scripts. So what's going to happen here is this order is filled in. There's going to be a verification point to make sure that it goes in as closed won. And we're going to go into, after this, go into SAP. All right, there's our validation that's happening. And just so you know, this is a video, but it's a real-time playback of a script. And this is all one script, right? It's all happening in one workflow. So now we go into Fiori, and we do have SAP activity packages that allow us to recognize some of the Fiori controls because SAP has highly customized their interfaces, as everybody probably knows. That's common practice with them. So all the required data is being entered, and the opportunity name that we're using here will be the same one used in Salesforce. And the order number will be stored after we create it and used when we go to the next step, which is to go to the SAP Win GUI or SAP GUI application, and we create our delivery and billing documents. So we'll just let this finish up. All right, I think that's just about it. We're going to be creating our delivery and billing documents now. Now, just a side note here, this is a robot running an automation, and we're seeing it because we are doing this for demo purposes. But typically, a robot's going to run on a virtual machine with an emulated display in the infrastructure stack somewhere. And you can have thousands of these robots running automations in parallel. Just so you understand, that's kind of what's going on in the bigger picture of things here. This is just a single robot running on our desktop. So here we go, creating our data file in AS400. So we're using our UiPath Studio terminal. And again, all of this is within the same workflow. So you don't have to break out into different tools or different projects or anything like that. This can all be done as one. And we're going to look at Studio next. I'm going to show you a live run through of a script that's much, much shorter than this. But I want to make sure you all understand how Studio fits into the picture, what it looks like, what it feels like to be inside of it. All right, so we're going to need to now, after doing all this work, analyze the results. Let's go to the end here to make sure. At this point, what we can see going back into Test Manager and looking at the results is that the first 3 verifications passed. So the first assertion or verification checked the opportunity status to make sure it was closed won. Okay. And I'm going to pause that right there. So it was validating that we were closed won. Then we wanted to make sure that the output value of the text was captured and contained standard order. The failure occurred in creating the billing document due to having an incorrect processing status. And then when creating the data file, we used a name that already existed. So now we can see screenshots of these steps to better understand what's happening. So here is the position where we're, let's go back here a little bit. So we can see the screenshot right there. So we're capturing these assertions and validations within the script. We can see the screenshots. We can deep dive into what actually happened. We also have additional logs, execution details, and logs of the actual running of each part of the script. And at the very end of the process here, we're creating a ticket in Jira. So this is an integrated instance of Test Manager, and we're able to have that ticket created for us. So now let's go on to an actual live demo. So I'm going to bring up Studio. All right. And again, this is for all of you who have never seen Studio or might be new to UiPath. What you're looking at now is this is the development environment. On the left-hand side, I have all of my files related to my project. In the center is the actual script. So this is a low-code representation of a test flow. I'm not going to go through what each of the steps does. On the right-hand side, though, this is a list of all of my test cases that are inside of my project. And I can run these test cases from here. I don't have to be in Test Manager to do it. So that's how I'm going to operate in this case. And what I'm doing is pulling in data from Test Manager. So I'm actually pulling in this data that you see here, the plant, the ship to party, sold to party, and so forth. I'm actually pulling that in from our data service module. So here's the actual data. And you can see I've got a filter that's applied in the background that will only return rows where use and test is marked as yes. So you can see 4 rows of data here, but in the script, I'm only pulling back 3. So when I run this, which I will do right now, I'm just going to run it on 1 row of data. We're going to open the SAP WinGUI is going to open. You're going to see the login screen in just a second. All right, and the output from this script is going to be an order number that we're going to see in the log in just a second here. So this is done. And down here is our newly created order number. So at this point, I'm done with that run. This is what the interface is going to look like. I'm connected to a data service to do this, our data service. So it's kind of like tables in the cloud that all the robots could automate, or all the robots can access. And if you have any other inquiries about using Studio, doing automations, things like that, we have tons of material out on the internet, and there'll be some links associated with this webinar. So let's go back over to our presentation, and I want to now get into like, how do we figure out what to test? So we can do the testing, we can automate the interface, we can step through different platforms, we can step through different GUIs. How do we figure out what we need to do, and how do we figure out how to do it? And what's the best, approach, and how has our coverage actually been? So it's a multi-step process at this point. The first thing we need to do is figure out, what are people using? How do we know what are the most widely used transactions in the system? And how do we figure out how those transactions are going to be affected by code changes in transports that are coming up? So the way that we do that is we use first our SAP heatmap feature. And this is going to tell us, again, how the system is really being used. So in terms of what are the most common transactions, with the ability to filter things out that are always going to be common, but we can get down to kind of the lower level of what are, for the particular business and the enterprise and the modules being used, what are the transactions that are really going to be critical. And then we're going to look at change impact analysis to understand, how are my transports going to actually alter those transactions and help me prioritize my testing. Okay, so let's take a look at heat map. Okay, so the heat map is a part of Test Manager. So this is a service that's turned on inside of Test Manager, and it gives you what you would traditionally expect from a heat map. We've got different sized rectangles with different information about what's in each one. And the color coding is provided below. So we have several transactions here that are showing their level of use. So if I hover over one of them, we can get more detailed information and see exactly how much it's used. Okay, but the color coding is telling us we're missing some test cases to cover these actual transactions. All right, if it's white and we have the white space and that's not filled, then those are things that those are transactions that do not have any coverage whatsoever. And that means simply that in the background here, we have test cases that don't have any tags associated with these transactions. So within UiPath, you can assign tags to the different test cases, and then that allows logic to create a view to give us a picture of what's actually being covered, what's not covered, and then also what's passed and failed. So in green, we can see all the past test cases, and we have one that did not pass. So if we take a view here and try to understand, what do we need to test, what's going to be coming up, to allow us to get better coverage for the most business critical pathways through here, we may want to go in and filter this out, because right now we're looking at all the interface types. We're looking at usage over the last week. All right, I could change this to last month. The chart will update, it takes a second or two. And I could just say, okay, give me the top 10 transactions. So instead of all the noise with all the things that are hardly ever used, or maybe just batch jobs or touching something every once in a while, things like that. And now I've got my view for last month updated. I could just look at the top 10 transactions. Okay, and now I can see much more clearly where my white space is. We go back to top 20. We'll see that view update again. Now I can configure the way that this is drawn by giving different priorities and weightings to these factors. And this is documented. I'm not going to change this here, but suffice to say, you have the ability to customize this per user to see what's going to be most relevant for your situation. All right, and just so you guys get a view, this is what is in my interface type dropdown and my transaction type dropdown. So if I just want to look at my custom transactions, of which in the top 20, I don't have any in this instance. So we'll just look at standard. But this is the overall picture of what's happening in my production environment. So the next step is to look at the change impact. So if I click on Analyze Transports, that's going to take me into the change impact side of things. And what I'm being told here is I've got 4 transports that can be analyzed between this date range right here. And I could choose which ones I want to include in the analysis. I'm just going to choose them all. We'll click on Analyze. So now we're going to get another heat map first. And that heat map has a slightly different color scheme to it to illustrate what's being covered by a test and what's not, and also where my white space is. Okay. So my gaps in this case are marked in red. So these aren't failed tests. These are just places where I have gaps in my coverage for testing. Where I have a fit, I've got an actual test. And not impacted just simply means that of these 4 transports, these transactions were not impacted, and I don't need to worry about them. Okay, and I have the same sort of filtering here, the same interface type filtering, and I have some shortcuts if I want to go in and see these gaps. The easier way to deal with this at this point is to go over to a list view that we have, and now I can see the gaps. I can see the labels next to the test case that corresponds to my fit. If I click on any of these links, it's going to take me directly to that test case. They're automated test cases, so there's not really anything to see in Test Manager. But this information now is at my fingertips, and I can export this and then act upon this to make sure I've got better test coverage going forward. One of the things that's really nice about doing this, and you may have already asked this question, we're looking at the heat map in production. How do we look at change impact analysis in production as well? And would we do that? And the answer is no. You don't want to look at change impact analysis in production. You're going to want to see what happens when your transports are being applied to a lower environment so that you can see what's going to happen before the transports are actually applied, right? The whole purpose is to test and be prepared, mitigate risk, have predictability in the release, and so forth. So what you can do in project settings, where in Test Manager you configure the integrations, is actually go into SAP Heatmap, and if I edit my settings, I could make a choice to point to the same environment. And since I'm in a demonstration environment, that's what we're doing here. But if I create a new connection, I'm going to get the same fields popping up, and I can create a pointer or a reference to a lower environment. So my change impact analysis data is actually going to come from, a dev environment, integ environment, whatever it may be. And that way, the transports can be applied. I can do my analysis, and then I can create my tests, move those transports, to the next environment, do more testing, and all that happens, of course, before we get into production. All right, and with that, we are done here showing heat map and change impact analysis. We are open now, I believe, to take questions. Faraz?
All right, thanks, Chris. So yeah, let's open up for some questions here, folks.
So we do have one question in the chat. Can you show us the sample of tag value for heat map?
Yes, let me bring that back up. Okay, so if we look at a test case, it might be tricky to get one. I'll just pick the first one here. So this one just has the default label of automated. But what you will find when there are more, I'll try one more. There we go. So this is what the tag values that are automatically assigned will look like. So from that heat map screen, if I see a gap, I can choose to create a test from that screen, and it's automatically going to fill in the associated transaction. It's going to put that label in automatically when I create that test case. And what I can do within heatmap is I can create those test cases, and then an automation could be linked to that placeholder for that test case with those tags. It's a good question. Thanks.
Great. Any more questions for Chris or myself? I know we showed a lot, and I think we covered quite a bit here. I talked about autopilot. Chris has shown change impact analysis as well as the heat map. So welcome any questions. So we've got one more. For test manager, do we require separate license? So test manager is part of what we call the platform SKU. So if you buy a platform SKU, which is part of our new licensing, then you get test manager. You can also buy test manager on its own, and there's a separate pricing. But if you have an orchestrator, if you're a UiPath RPA platform users, and if you have the platform SKU, then you already have test manager. Right. Any other questions? Yes. Is test manager available on-prem environment? Yes, it is available. Absolutely. However, we recommend using the cloud environment. It just allows you to be, makes it easier for integration purposes with other tools. As we talked about earlier, test manager is really allows you to manage your testing, but also it's an integration hub with third-party test management or application lifecycle management products. Okay, we've got one more question. Change impact analysis and heat maps have separate licenses. I can take that one. So heat map actually comes with test manager. So if you have test manager, you should be able to configure heat map. Change impact testing is a separate license. And the way change impact testing licensing works is based on the SAP transport. So if you're in an SAP environment, you probably know that every time you make a change into the environment, you have to package a transport and pass it and pass it into an environment. So what we do is we look at the transport and then look at what changes has happened. So the licensing is really based on the transport, and the minimum licensing for transport is that you get 100 units, and minimum is 1,000. That's how it's priced, and it's separately priced again.
And for us, are those cumulative over time? So with over a year?
The licensing for transports,
yeah.
Is that the question? Yeah, it's consumption based. So as you use the transports, if you consume, let's say if you have 100, you've used 5, then you got 95. So it's really consumption based.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is, can we integrate UiPath Test Manager with any other RPA platform as a capability? Chris, you want to take that one?
Well, you can build a robot to do anything. So, and that's the whole, that's the gist of the RPA platform, is filling in where there is not an existing integration. So if you wanted to use other tools, you can certainly do that, and robots can work together. But they will kind of meet in a common playing field, which would be whatever system is under test or whatever data is being exchanged, whatever common systems might be in the middle. If you want to drop UiPath into another tool, that's not really what we do, but we integrate and share information, like I was saying, and a work stream between robots from different tools could certainly be put together.
Great, thanks, Chris. I've got next question. Can POC be built on community version? I'm assuming POC is proof of concept. So yes, the short answer is yes, it can be done. Can this be integrated with Soulman, which is SAP, Active Control, or any other transport tools?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have out-of-the-box integration with Solution Manager, SAP Soulman. So that's out of the box. It should be able to, no issues there.
Right. Within Studio, one of the things I did not emphasize is that the ability to pull in packages from our partners and from within UiPath itself to enable different capabilities is one of the integration points. We also have a module called Integration Services that lets you connect directly with any number of tools that have integration points, be they standard APIs, or in case of SAP, if anything's proprietary, we've built that out. So by doing that in the cloud and integration services, then all the robots that get created, all the automations can share those connections and share the same information.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. I've got another question. This is again for you. We're using Orchestrator on-prem, and we wish to use Test Manager on UiPath Cloud. Is it possible to implement this in a hybrid environment?
No, it's possible, but you would have separate tenants. So taking the information out of the on-premises instance and coordinating that with Test Manager would not be feasible. You would want to either have the platform in the cloud or the platform on premises. There's really not a limitation to having Test Manager on premises. That's the advantage, though, to having everything in the cloud is that you're going to get updates faster. You're going to get better support because of the accessibility that we would have to help see any issues in logging. And upcoming, our AI capabilities require cloud. So that's really what you want to do, is go all in with cloud. And unless there's a very specific reason for not doing it, there's no reason not to go to cloud. Because UiPath now, I mean, we have in the US, FedRAMP acceptance, where the cloud has won basically. So it's worth pushing for, it's worth fighting for, to get UiPath in the cloud so that you can get access to all the things we're going to be developing around AI, and you don't have to worry about hybrid anything.
Great. I've gotten one more question for you, Chris. Can you provide more insights into how heatmaps understands the gaps in testing coverage just based on test case tags?
Well, the coverage is based on the test cases that are in Test Manager, and those tests have tags associated with them. And if the data obtained by heatmap, which I think is like an STN03 transaction, if those transaction names are not matching up to the tags that are in the tests, there's nothing else to kind of do. Like it's a pretty simple, like on a case-by-case basis, it's very easy match. So there is a phase where if you were using heatmap for the first time and you had a large number of tests, you would have to start putting those tags into your tests in Test Manager to see the coverage within heatmap. And we make that easy from the heatmap interface, so that in addition to just being able to create tests from the heatmap interface, you can also assign existing tests to transactions. So you're there is the building of that data that has to take place. And I believe we can do a mass import also. So if you wanted to map that out in Excel or something like that, and then apply that, that's possible. Great.
Thanks, Chris. Folks, any more questions? That was our last question. We've got about 6 minutes left. So I would encourage you to ask any questions for Chris or myself.
You have
Chris,
one in the chat.
Yep, and if you can go to the next screen, Chris, I have a call to action as well.
Yes.
All right, so I've got another question from Ravneet. The question is, let's assume we have a client with existing automation scripts for SAP. How does the migration to Test Suite look like?
We would need to analyze that to understand the details around the current automation tool that's being used, the volume of tests, the current ALM tool that might be in use. There are several factors to take into account there before it's possible to even understand the amount of time or the amount of effort that it would take to do that. We do have methodologies around that, and we do have professional services around that. I would say typically if it's an existing SAP shop with tests in the thousands, Faraz, maybe you can comment on this too. It could be anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months, it's a project. There's no easy way to consume it. We do have accelerators in the marketplace that help. But again, it would take further analysis to really be able to determine that.
Yeah, if I may just add on it, right? I mean, I get this question quite a bit actually from our customers because let's face it, the reality is that with SAP, if you're doing test automation, chances are either you're doing it manually or you're using some kind of legacy tool like UFT, and those are some common scenarios. So my response to the customer is that instead of thinking of converting your existing automation to Test Suite, maybe let's take a step back and think about this from a different perspective, right? It's just not about conversion, but it's also an opportunity to really reestablish your foundation around testing. The legacy tools follow legacy best practices. Test Suite, UiPath, some of the modern tools have new best practices frameworks, right? So again, it's really your opportunity to optimize your testing processes. How do you do your testing overall, test automation? And it could be as much as even looking at the structure of your scripts. How are you grouping your objects, right? So again, my response to the customer on the migration or using existing automation is to really take this as an opportunity to reestablish, establish new processes, and instead of converting those scripts, develop those scripts from scratch so that they're optimized for future testing and future technologies and innovation that's coming up. Question for you, Chris. Does UiPath support Cucumber BDD? Can we have reusable components based on that? And that would be the last question.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, actually. In the concept, BDD development, yes, absolutely. So reusability is a big deal with what we do in Studio. And it's very easy to create, for teams to create activities and share them with other users. So one of the things that we always promote is sharing of components between an RPA development team and the test team. And when you're talking about Cucumber and Gherkin and implementation around that yes, can be done, but the way that we have our reusability structured really doesn't require you to get into that strict structure around Cucumber. Since we're implementing things with a low-code, no-code approach in modules, what you'll find is that you can do the given, when, then structure, certainly in your tests. Like that's our test template, actually. It comes out like that when you create a new test case. However, what you'll find is that the BDD language to then lead to an implementation isn't necessary. The low-code nature of the script itself allows you to kind of sidestep that. It's something you have to see and experience, I think, to get further into it. If you want to just take existing Java code, let's say, because you probably have a big Java project where you're using Cucumber, we can take that and run it. So if you still want to run your existing Cucumber-based tests, all you need to do is compile that into an executable jar file. Then we can scan that. We've got a Java activity package. It can read all the methods and play everything that's there. So I would suggest if you're interested in learning a little bit more, we've got a ton of documentation around that. And feel free to scan this QR code and fill out some information on the form, and we can follow up with you.
Perfect segue. Thank you, Chris. Folks, so we have got a QR code on the screen. If you want to scan that, that will take you to a form where you can provide your information, your company name, your name. And we ask some basic questions. These are basically qualification question, preparation questions. Once we collect those questions, we can set up a call with you and deep dive into a specific topic if you like. With that, I really want to thank everyone that joined. Really appreciate your time. I know it's hard to get an hour out of your busy day, so we greatly appreciate it. And we're looking forward to the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Faraz and Chris, for speaking today, and for all the great questions that came in. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.